That necklace belongs to my dead wife. The roar exploded through the Gangnam restaurant, shattering the gentle murmur of clinking glasses and polite conversation like a bullet through glass. Lee Jun-ho, neck tattoos exposed, veins bulging with fury, the most feared mafia boss in all of Seoul, shot up from his private table, his face twisted with barely contained rage, his finger pointed straight at the chest of a black American waitress. Nora froze in the middle of the floor. A tray of dirty dishes still balanced in her trembling hands, feeling the blood in her veins turn to ice. Instinctively, she stepped back and brought one hand to her throat, shielding the jade and gold locket that hung there. "Sir, I didn't steal anything," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I swear." Jun-ho didn't listen. He kicked aside the chair blocking his path and surged toward her like a gathering storm. Diners at nearby tables scrambled away, terrified by the rage radiating from the man whose name alone made politicians disappear and grown men weep. "Don't lie to me," Jun-ho growled, cornering her against a marble pillar. His hand shot out and wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, not yet, but holding her in place like a vice. "My wife was wearing that locket the night she burned. I held her body. I buried her. So tell me, where did you get it? Speak." The restaurant manager, Mr. Kang, came running, his face flushed with panic. "Mr. Lee, please, I beg you, calm down." He wedged himself between them, hands waving frantically. "1,000 apologies, sir. This woman just started last week. Clearly a thief. Clearly incompetent." He turned to Nora, voice cold as steel. "You're fired. Get out before I call the police, or worse." Mr. Kang grabbed Nora's arm, roughly dragging her toward the kitchen. Nora cried out in pain, but before she could resist, a powerful hand seized the manager's wrist and squeezed until his knuckles went white. It was Jun-ho. "Let her go," his voice dropped low. "Dangerous. Deadly. Touch her again, and I will bury this restaurant. And you, by sunrise. Before we dive into this story, tell me where in the world you're watching from. I want to know how far this lovely story traveled. Drop your country in the comments, hit that subscribe button. I read every single one comment here, so please drop your comments now. Let's begin. Nora Bennett had been invisible her entire life. Tonight was no different. She moved through the Gangnam restaurant like a ghost, refilling water glasses no one thanked her for, clearing plates no one noticed her take, smiling at customers who looked straight through her like she was made of smoke. 14 hours into a double shift. Feet screaming. Back aching. Soul somewhere far away, floating above her body, watching a woman who had learned long ago that surviving meant disappearing. The restaurant was called Celestine, one of those places where a single appetizer cost more than Nora made in a week. Crystal chandeliers. White marble floors. Men in suits that probably cost more than the car she'd never own. Women dripping in diamonds, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, pretending not to notice the waitstaff unless something was wrong. Nora didn't belong here. She knew it. They knew it. But the tips were decent and the manager let her sleep in the storage closet on nights when she couldn't afford the bus fare back to her rented room, a room she shared with 2 other women who pretended she didn't exist. Invisible. Always invisible. She touched the locket at her throat. A habit she'd had since childhood. The jade and gold pendant was warm against her skin, the only thing of value she owned. The only thing that proved she had ever been wanted by anyone, even for a moment. "Find where you belong," her dying foster mother had whispered, pressing it into her hands. "This belonged to your mother. Your real mother. Find where you belong." 17 years of searching. 17 years of dead ends. And now here she was. 27 years old, alone in a foreign country, working herself to death in a restaurant full of people who would never know her name. The front doors opened. Nora didn't look up. She was clearing a table near the back, stacking plates with mechanical efficiency, her mind already calculating how many more hours until she could collapse. But she felt it. The room changed. The air shifted. Conversation stuttered and died like candles snuffed by a sudden wind. She heard the sharp intake of breath from a woman nearby. The clatter of a fork dropping against porcelain. Nora looked up. And the world stopped. A man stood in the entrance. Tall. Broad. Dressed in a black suit that fit him like a second skin. Neck tattoos crawled up from his collar, dark ink disappearing beneath his jaw. His face was carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, hollow eyes, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile decades ago. Behind him, 6 men in identical black suits fanned out like shadows. Nora had never seen him before. But she knew, the way prey knows when a predator enters the clearing, that this man was death wearing human skin. Lee Jun-ho. She'd heard the name whispered in the kitchen. In the alleyways. In the fearful hush of people who knew better than to say it too loud. The most powerful man in Seoul's underworld. The king of the Korean Mafia. A man who had built an empire on blood and never once apologized for the bodies beneath it. He walked toward his private table in the back, his men parting the crowd like water before a blade. Nora dropped her gaze and turned away, heart pounding, telling herself to keep moving, keep working, keep being invisible. You. The word cracked through the restaurant like a whip. Nora froze. She turned slowly, praying he was talking to someone else, anyone else. But Lee Jun-ho was staring directly at her. His black eyes locked onto her chest. Onto the jade locket resting against her stained uniform. His face, already terrifying, transformed into something worse. Something broken. His eyes went wide. His lips parted. His hands began to shake. And then he moved. 3 strides. That's all it took. 3 strides and he was on her, crossing the restaurant faster than she could blink, faster than she could run, faster than she could scream. His hand wrapped around her throat and lifted her off the ground. The restaurant emptied in minutes. Jun-ho's men moved like wolves, silent, efficient, terrifying. They cleared every table, escorted every diner out with polite words that carried the weight of threats, and sealed every exit. The manager, Mr. Kong, was still on his knees near the kitchen door, trembling so hard Nora could hear his teeth chattering from across the room. She sat on a velvet chair in the private VIP section, her back pressed against the wall, her hands clenched in her lap to stop them from shaking. Her throat still burned where his fingers had been. She could still feel the ghost of his grip, iron wrapped in flesh, squeezing until stars burst behind her eyes. But she hadn't run. She could have. When Jun-ho collapsed to his knees, when his men rushed to his side, when the chaos erupted, she could have slipped out the back. Disappeared into the Seoul night. Become invisible again, the way she always did. But she was so tired of running. 27 years of running from foster homes. Running from questions. Running from the hollow ache in her chest that whispered you were thrown away, you were unwanted, you were never meant to exist. If this man, this monster, had answers, she would stay. Even if it killed her. Jun-ho sat across from her now, his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. He hadn't spoken since he fell. His men stood at a distance, watching, waiting, their faces betraying nothing. But Nora saw the way they looked at their boss, like they were witnessing something impossible. Like they had never seen him break before. The door opened. A middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped inside, carrying a black leather case. Gold-rimmed glasses. Calm, steady hands. He moved like someone accustomed to being summoned in the middle of the night, accustomed to asking no questions. Dr. Yoon, one of Jun-ho's men said. The test. Now. The doctor didn't hesitate. He approached Nora, opened his case, and pulled out a small device and a sterile needle. Your arm, please, he said quietly. Nora looked at Jun-ho. He hadn't moved. Hadn't lifted his head. What is this? She asked, her voice hoarse. Blood doesn't lie, Jun-ho said without looking up. If you are who I think you are, the blood will tell me. Nora didn't understand. But she extended her arm anyway. The needle pinched. A vial filled with red. The doctor moved to a small table, worked in silence, fed samples into a machine that hummed and blinked. 20 minutes. The longest 20 minutes of Nora's life. She stared at Junho. He stared at the floor. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft whir of the machine, the distant hum of the city outside, and the pounding of Nora's heart so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. Then the machine beeped. Dr. Yoon stared at the screen. His face went pale. His hands, those calm, steady hands, began to tremble. "Mr. Lee," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The results." Junho's head snapped up. "Say it." Dr. Yoon swallowed. Looked at Nora. Looked back at the screen as if hoping the numbers would change. 99.98% match, he said. To the stored DNA sample of Kong Min-ji. The world stopped. Nora felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. Her mind screamed questions she couldn't form into words. Who is Kong Min-ji? Why does my blood match hers? What does this mean? Junho rose slowly. He took the paper from the doctor's shaking hands. Stared at it for a long moment. At the numbers, at the name, at the impossible truth printed in black and white. Then he looked at Nora. His eyes were wet. His jaw trembled. And when he spoke, his voice cracked like ice breaking over a frozen river. You were supposed to be dead, he whispered. I buried you. I buried you. Nora shook her head. I don't understand. Who is Min-ji? What are you talking about? Junho took a step toward her. Then another. He stopped inches away, looking down at her with an expression she had never seen directed at her before. Not anger. Not pity. Not indifference. Desperate, devastating hope. Min-ji, he said, his voice breaking on the name, was my wife. And you are my daughter. 27 years ago. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. 19-year-old Lee Junho was in the back room of his uncle's gambling den, counting money that wasn't his, dreaming of a life that didn't exist yet. He was nobody then. Just another street kid clawing his way up from the gutter, hungry and angry and desperate to become something more. But he had Min-ji. And Min-ji had him. And in 3 weeks, they would have a baby. That was enough. That was everything. His phone buzzed. He answered without looking, expecting her voice, expecting her to complain about swollen ankles or midnight cravings or the tiny apartment that was too small for 3 people but would somehow be perfect anyway. Instead, he heard screaming. Junho, it was Park, his friend from the docks. His voice was ragged, broken. The warehouse, Min-ji, there's a fire. The phone hit the floor before Park finished speaking. Junho ran. He ran through the narrow streets of Seoul like a man possessed, shoving past strangers, knocking over vendors, his lungs burning, his legs screaming, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would explode. He tried to call Min-ji. No answer. Tried again. No answer. Again. 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 Please. 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 He smelled the smoke before he saw the flames. The warehouse rose against the night sky like a dying star, orange and red and furious, fire pouring from every window, black smoke swallowing the moon. Fire trucks surrounded the building. Firefighters shouted orders. Crowds gathered at the edges, their faces lit by the hellish glow. Junho didn't stop. He charged toward the entrance, screaming her name. Amanji. Amanji. A firefighter grabbed him. You can't go in there. Junho broke his nose with one punch and kept running. The heat hit him like a wall. Like the breath of a dragon. Like the mouth of hell opening wide to swallow him whole. He couldn't see. Couldn't breathe. The smoke invaded his lungs, his eyes, his soul. But he kept moving, kept screaming, kept searching. Manji. Where are you? Manji. He found nothing. Just fire. Just ash. Just the roar of a building dying around him. Hands grabbed him from behind. 3 men. 4. They dragged him out as the ceiling collapsed, as the flames reached for him like fingers, as his screams turned to sobs. She's gone, someone said. The baby's gone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They showed him a body. Charred. Twisted. Unrecognizable. A blackened shape that had once been a woman. That had once been his woman. That had once been the only person in the world who looked at him like he was worth something. Junho fell to his knees in the ash. He gathered what remained of her into his arms. Held her against his chest. Felt the heat still radiating from her ruined flesh. And something inside him, something that had been soft, something that had been capable of love and hope and joy, turned to ash with her. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply emptied. When he finally spoke, his voice was not his own. It was the voice of something darker. Something that would never feel warmth again. I will find who did this. He reached into the ash. Dragged his fingers through it until they bled. Drew a line across his palm with a shard of broken glass. I swear on my blood. I will find them. And I will make them suffer for eternity. For 27 years, Lee Junho kept that oath. He built an empire from nothing. Crushed anyone who stood in his way. Became the most feared man in Seoul, the king of the underworld, a monster whose name made grown men weep. But he never found them. He never found the people who took Minji from him. Never found the truth behind the fire. Never found peace. Until tonight. Until a black American waitress with his dead wife's locket around her neck looked him in the eye and said the words that shattered 27 years of grief. My mother left me this necklace. His daughter was alive. And now, finally, the hunt could begin. The compound rose from the hills outside Seoul like a fortress built to survive the end of the world. Black iron gates. 20-foot walls topped with cameras and razor wire. Armed guards at every entrance, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, their hands never far from the weapons at their sides. Beyond the gates, a sprawling estate of cold marble and glass, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Elegant. Lethal. Utterly without warmth. Nora stepped out of the black SUV and felt the walls close around her. A cage, she thought. He's put me in a cage. Junho walked ahead of her, flanked by his men. He hadn't spoken since they left the restaurant. Hadn't explained where they were going. Hadn't asked if she wanted to come. He simply took her arm, gently this time, so gently it made her skin crawl, and guided her into the car like she was something precious. Something owned. She followed him through the marble entrance, past hallways lined with art she didn't recognize, past rooms filled with furniture that cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. A maid appeared and disappeared. A guard nodded and stepped aside. Everything moved around Junho like water around a stone. He stopped in front of a door and opened it. Your room, he said. Nora looked inside. A king-sized bed draped in white silk. A chandelier that scattered light like diamonds. A window overlooking a garden that probably had more flowers than her entire neighborhood back in Chicago. She laughed. It came out bitter and broken. My room, she repeated. Just like that. I'm supposed to, what? Move in. Play daughter. Pretend the last 27 years didn't happen. Junho's jaw tightened. You'll be safe here. Safe. Nora whirled on him, her voice rising. I was surviving just fine before you grabbed me by the throat and turned my life upside down. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you. I know. You don't know anything. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I don't need a father. I needed one 27 years ago. I needed someone when I was 5 years old, crying myself to sleep in a foster home that smelled like mold. I needed someone when I was 12, getting bounced to another family because I was too difficult. I needed someone when I was 17, sleeping on park benches because no one wanted me. Her voice cracked. Where were you then? Jun-ho stood motionless. His face was stone. But his eyes, those black, bottomless eyes, glistened with something that looked like agony. I was burying you, he said quietly. I was holding what I thought was your body and promising your mother I would find who did this. I was building an empire on the ashes of my grief, searching for ghosts, never knowing you were alive. He paused. I failed you. I know that. And I will spend whatever time I have left earning what I can never deserve. Nora stared at him. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to run. Instead, she walked into the room and slammed the door in his face. She woke to the sound of gunfire. 3 shots. Close. Too close. Nora scrambled out of bed, her heart slamming against her ribs. The door burst open, and Jun-ho stood in the frame, a gun in each hand, blood splattered across his white shirt. Stay behind me, he said. She didn't have time to argue. He moved through the hallway like a shadow made flesh. 2 bodies lay near the staircase. Men in black, throats slit, eyes staring at nothing. A third came around the corner with a knife. Jun-ho disarmed him in one motion and broke his neck with his bare hands. The sound echoed through the marble halls. Then silence. Jun-ho stood in the aftermath, chest heaving, covered in the blood of men who had come to kill her. He turned to look at Nora, and his eyes were not the eyes of a monster. They were the eyes of a father. They know you're alive, he said. And they're terrified. They found her in a village 3 hours outside Seoul. A place so small it didn't appear on most maps. Dirt roads. Crumbling houses. The kind of place people went to disappear, or to die. Jun-ho's men had spent 2 days searching. Following whispers. Chasing ghosts. The name kept surfacing in old hospital records, in buried files, in the trembling confessions of people who had been paid to forget. Park Soon-hee. Nurse. Assigned to the private ward. Disappeared the night of the fire. Now she lived in a one-room shack at the edge of the village, surrounded by empty soju bottles and 27 years of guilt. Jun-ho stepped out of the black SUV and walked toward the house alone. His men stayed behind. This was not a conversation for witnesses. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. The smell hit him first, stale alcohol, unwashed clothes, the sour rot of a life abandoned. The room was dark, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. In the corner, huddled on a thin mattress, sat an old woman. She looked up when he entered. And she smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a surprised smile. The smile of someone who had been waiting for death and was relieved it had finally arrived. Lee Jun-ho, she said. Her voice was cracked, ruined by decades of drinking. I wondered when you'd find me. Jun-ho stood in the doorway, his shadow falling across her like a blade. You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are. She reached for a half-empty bottle beside her mattress, took a long drink. The boy who became a monster. The husband who never stopped searching. I've watched you from afar all these years. Watched you burn the world looking for answers. Her hands trembled as she set the bottle down. I have them. The answers. I've been drowning them in soju for 27 years, but they never stay down. Jun-ho stepped closer. Then speak. Park Soon-hee closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her weathered cheeks. I was the nurse, she whispered. The night your wife gave birth. I was there. The words hung in the air like smoke. She was beautiful, your Min-ji. Even in labor, even in pain, she was beautiful. She kept saying your name. Kept asking for you. Where's Jun-ho? Where's my husband? He should be here. He should be here. Junho's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. The baby came at 11:23 p.m. A girl. Healthy. Perfect. Minji held her for maybe 10 minutes. She was crying. Happy tears. She said the baby had your eyes. Park Suni's voice broke. Then they came. 2 people. They paid me so much money, to look the other way. To let them finish it. They smothered Minji while I stood outside the door. I heard her struggle. I heard her stop. Junho's entire body went rigid. Every muscle. Every breath. The monster inside him was screaming, clawing, demanding blood. And the baby? He asked, his voice barely human. They handed her to me. Park Suni was sobbing now, her frail body shaking. They said, dispose of it. Like she was garbage. Like she was nothing. She looked up at Junho, her eyes pleading. But I couldn't. I looked at that baby, that innocent, perfect baby with her mother's face and her father's eyes, and I couldn't do it. There was a missionary group leaving that night. Black Americans from a church in Chicago. I gave them the baby. I gave them the locket. And I whispered in that little girl's ear, find your way home. She fell to her knees before him. Kill me if you want. I deserve it. I let your wife die. I've lived with that sin for 27 years. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But first, let me tell you who paid me. Junho knelt down until his face was level with hers. Say the names. Park Suni looked into the eyes of the monster, and gave him what he'd been hunting for 27 years. Kwon Tae-sung. And Kang Soo-yeon. The names hit him like bullets. Kwon Tae-sung. Kang Soo-yeon. Junho didn't move. Didn't breathe. The world around him, the crumbling shack, the weeping woman, the distant sounds of the village. All of it faded into nothing. There was only the names. Only the faces attached to them. Only the memories flooding back like poison through his veins. Tae-sung. His blood-sworn brother. The boy he'd grown up with in the gutters of Seoul, stealing food to survive, fighting side by side against anyone who tried to crush them. The man who had stood beside him at Minji's funeral, who had held him while he wept, who had whispered, I'll help you find them, brother. I swear on my life, we'll find who did this. The man who had helped him build an empire on the ashes of his grief. Who sat at his right hand for 27 years. Who knew every secret. Every weakness. Every crack in Junho's armor. And Soo-yeon. Minji's twin sister. The woman who had screamed the loudest at the memorial, who had collapsed against Junho's chest and sobbed until her voice gave out. The woman who visited Minji's grave every year on the anniversary, laying white flowers on the headstone, whispering prayers that now rang hollow as lies. She had the same face as Minji. The same eyes. The same smile. For 27 years, Junho had looked at her and seen a ghost of the woman he loved. He had protected her. Provided for her. Treated her like family because she was all he had left of Minji. And the whole time, she had been the one who ordered his wife's murder. Junho's hand began to tremble. Not with fear. Never with fear. With a rage so pure, so absolute, it felt like fire replacing the blood in his veins. They had been in his house for 27 years. Eating his food. Drinking his wine. Taking his trust, his loyalty, his brotherhood, and laughing behind his back. Smiling at him across dinner tables while his daughter grew up alone and unloved on the other side of the world. While Nora slept on park benches. While Nora cried herself to sleep in foster homes that smelled like mold. While Nora believed, for 27 years, that she was unwanted. That she was garbage. That no one on earth had ever loved her. They did that. They stole her. They erased her. They condemned an innocent baby to a life of suffering so they could have, what? Power. Money. Each other. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Taesung had always wanted control of the empire. Soo-yeon had always been jealous of her sister, jealous of Min-ji's beauty, her happiness, her husband. Together, they had seen an opportunity. Together, they had burned it all down. And then they had stood beside Junho in the ashes and pretended to mourn. For 27 years. Park Suni was still on her knees, still weeping. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I was weak. I was scared. I took their money and I let your wife die and I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Junho looked down at her. The monster inside him wanted to kill her. Wanted to wrap his hands around her throat and squeeze until the apologies stopped. She had been there. She had heard Min-ji struggle. She had done nothing. But she had also saved his daughter. She had looked at a newborn baby marked for death and chosen mercy over money. She had carried Nora to safety, pressed the jade locket into her tiny hands, and whispered words that would echo across 27 years and an ocean. "Find your way home. You will testify," Junho said. His voice was ice. "You will tell everyone what you told me. Every detail. Every name. And then, only then, will I decide if you live." He turned and walked out of the shack. His men were waiting by the SUV. They saw his face, saw the trembling hands, the burning eyes, the barely contained fury, and stepped back. "Sir," one of them asked. Junho's voice came out like a blade being drawn. "Bring me Kwon Tae-sung. Bring me Kang Soo-yeon. And prepare the chamber." The underground chamber had no windows. Carved into the bedrock beneath Junho's compound, it was a place where oaths were sworn in blood and broken things were buried. The walls were stone. The floor was concrete, stained dark in places no one asked about. A single light hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the 50 men who stood in silence. The entire syndicate had been summoned. Lieutenants. Captains. Enforcers. Men who had killed for Junho. Men who would die for him. They stood in rows along the walls, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on the center of the room where 2 chairs had been placed. In those chairs sat Kwon Tae-sung and Kang Soo-yeon. They didn't know why they were here. Not yet. Tae-sung wore his usual confident smile, the smile of a man who had spent 27 years as the second most powerful person in the room. Soo-yeon sat with her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of elegant concern. "Brother," Tae-sung said as Junho entered, "what's this about? Your men dragged us here without explanation. Is something wrong?" Junho didn't answer. He walked to the front of the room and stopped. Behind him, 2 guards escorted a frail old woman forward. Park Suni trembled with every step, her eyes red from crying, her body hunched like she was trying to disappear. Tae-sung's smile flickered. Soo-yeon's mask cracked, just for a moment. "This woman has something to say," Junho said. His voice echoed off the stone walls. "You will listen." And Park Suni began to speak. She told them everything. The private ward. The birth. The 10 minutes Min-ji held her daughter before they came. The smothering. The order to dispose of the baby. The escape through the missionary group. The locket. The whisper, "Find your way home." Every word landed like a hammer blow. The room grew colder with each sentence. Men who had witnessed unspeakable violence shifted uncomfortably. Men who had never flinched at bloodshed looked away. When Park Suni finished, Junho raised his hand. A guard stepped forward with a folder. Documents spilled across a table, bank records showing payments to Park Suni, traced back through shell companies to accounts controlled by Tae-sung. Voice recordings, recovered from old phones, of hushed conversations planning the accident. And finally, a letter. Handwritten. Soo-yeon's handwriting, verified by 3 experts. Junho read it aloud. It's done. She's gone. The baby too. Can you believe how easy it was? He suspects nothing. By this time next year, everything she had will be mine. Everything she stole from me, returned. Finally. The room went silent. Taesung's confident smile had vanished. His face was pale, his eyes darting toward the exits blocked by armed men. But it was Soo-yeon who broke first. She launched from her chair, her mask shattering into 1,000 pieces, her voice rising to a scream that bounced off the stone walls. She stole everything from me. Everything. I was the older twin. I was the better one. But our parents loved her more. The world loved her more. And then you, she pointed at Junho, her fingers shaking with rage. You chose her. You looked at both of us and you chose her. It should have been me. I deserved your love. I deserved this life. She took what was mine. Nora stood near the back of the room, flanked by guards. She had insisted on being here. On seeing the truth with her own eyes. Soo-yeon's gaze found her. And you, she spat. You should have died with her. You should have burned. Taesung moved. A blade appeared in his hand, hidden in his sleeve, waiting for this moment. He lunged across the room toward Nora, his eyes wild, his teeth bared. He never reached her. Junho intercepted him in 3 steps. His hand caught Taesung's wrist. Twisted. The blade clattered to the floor. And then Junho did something that would haunt every man in that chamber for the rest of their lives. When it was over, Taesung was no longer screaming. He was no longer anything at all. The hospital room smelled like white flowers and goodbye. Nora stood in the doorway, her feet frozen to the floor, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The room was quiet, painfully quiet. Filled with soft afternoon light filtering through gauze curtains and the gentle beep of machines monitoring a life that was slowly fading. In the bed, propped against a mountain of white pillows, lay an old woman. She was small. Fragile. Her white hair spread across the pillow like silk threads, her papery skin almost translucent in the light. Tubes snaked from her arms. Monitors blinked beside her. But her eyes were bright. Alert. Alive with something that looked like it had been waiting a very long time. Kang Hae-won. Minji's mother. Nora's grandmother. Junho had told her on the drive over. Hae-won was dying, had been dying for months. Cancer. The doctors said she had days left, maybe less. She had refused to let go. Refused to close her eyes for the last time. She's been waiting, Junho had said, his voice rough. For 27 years, she's been waiting. She never believed you were dead. Never. While everyone else moved on, she lit candles. She prayed. She funded search after search, even when they found nothing. Even when they told her she was crazy. She knew you were out there. She said she could feel you. Now Nora stood at the threshold of that faith, and she couldn't move. What do you say to someone who spent 27 years praying for you? Someone who believed in you when you didn't even know you existed? Hae-won's eyes found her. And she smiled. It was the most beautiful smile Nora had ever seen. Warm. Radiant. Full of a love so deep and so patient it had outlasted decades of grief. Come here, Hae-won whispered. Her voice was thin, barely more than a breath. Come here, my girl. Let me see you. Nora's legs moved without permission. She crossed the room in slow, trembling steps, her vision blurring with tears she couldn't stop. She reached the bedside and looked down at the woman who had never stopped believing. And her walls crumbled. Every wall she'd built. Every defense she'd constructed. Every piece of armor she'd wrapped around her heart to survive 27 years of abandonment, it all came crashing down in an instant. Halmiani, Nora choked out. The Korean word for grandmother. A word she had never spoken before. A word she never thought she'd have the right to say. Hey-One reached up with a trembling hand and touched Nora's face. Her fingers were cool. Gentle. They traced Nora's cheeks, her jaw, her lips, memorizing every feature. I knew, Hey-One whispered. Tears slid down her weathered cheeks. I always knew you were alive. I could feel you. Across the ocean. Across the years. I felt you. Every night, I lit a candle and I whispered your name. I told God to keep you safe until you found your way back to me. Nora broke. A sob tore from her chest, raw, desperate, decades in the making. She collapsed onto the bed, crawling into her grandmother's arms like a child, burying her face against the old woman's shoulder, crying with everything she had. I thought no one wanted me, she wept. I thought I was thrown away. I thought I was nothing. Shoo. Hey-One's arms wrapped around her. Weak. Trembling. But holding on with a strength that defied her failing body. You were never unwanted, my beautiful girl. Never. You were stolen. Taken from us by monsters who couldn't stand the light you carried. She stroked Nora's hair, the same way she had dreamed of doing for 27 years. But you found your way back. Across oceans. Across time. Against everything. My brave, beautiful girl. Her voice cracked with emotion. You found your way home. Nora clung to her grandmother and sobbed. For the childhood she lost. For the mother she never knew. For the family that had wanted her all along. Hey-One died at dawn. The first light of morning crept through the hospital window, painting the room in soft shades of gold and pink. The machines had gone quiet. The beeping had stopped. There was only silence, the kind of silence that follows a long journey finally reaching its end. Nora sat beside the bed, her grandmother's hand still clasped in hers. She hadn't let go all night. Hadn't slept. Hadn't moved. She had simply held on, memorizing the feeling of being held by someone who loved her, terrified of the moment it would end. And now it had. Hey-One's face was peaceful. Serene. A soft smile still lingered on her lips, the same smile she had worn when Nora first walked through the door. The smile of a woman whose prayers had finally been answered. 27 years of candles. 27 years of whispered hopes. 27 years of believing when everyone else had given up. And in the end, she had gotten what she wanted. She had held her granddaughter. She had seen her face. She had said goodbye. Nora leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her grandmother's forehead. Thank you, she whispered. For never stopping. For always believing. For waiting for me. The tears came, but they were different now. Not the desperate, drowning tears of grief. These were quieter. Gentler. The tears of someone learning that love could outlast death. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Seoul. Cherry blossom trees lined the paths, their pink petals drifting through the air like whispered secrets. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across rows of white marble headstones, names and dates etched in stone, stories reduced to numbers. Nora stood before 3 graves. The first belonged to her mother, Kang Min-ji. A woman she had never known but somehow always carried inside her. The headstone was simple, elegant, adorned with fresh white flowers that Nora now knew had been placed by a murderer for 27 years. The second was freshly dug, Kang Hae-won, laid to rest beside her daughter at last. Together again. Finally at peace. The third plot was empty. Reserved. Waiting. Junho stood behind her, silent and steady. The monster. The weapon. The broken man who had spent 27 years searching for ghosts, and had finally found his daughter instead. I want to build something, Nora said. Her voice was soft but certain. A foundation. For children like me, stolen, abandoned, forgotten. Children who grow up believing no one wants them. Children who wait their whole lives for someone to come. She turned to look at him. So no child waits 27 years to hear the words, "You are wanted." Jun-ho met her gaze. His eyes glistened. "The Minji Foundation," he said. Nora nodded. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. For the first time in her life, truly smiling. Jun-ho stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder. The hand that had almost killed her the night they met. The hand that had killed for her in the days since. The hand of a monster, a protector, a father finally allowed to be one. "You have her eyes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have her strength. You have her heart." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked. "And you have me. Until the stars fall." Nora reached up and covered his hand with hers. "Until the stars fall," she whispered. She turned back to the graves, to the mother who died protecting her, to the grandmother who never stopped praying, to the empty plot that would one day hold the father she had finally found. She touched the jade locket at her throat. It was warm against her skin, carrying the ghosts of everyone who had loved her before she was born. "Iyama," she said softly, the Korean word for mother. "Halmiani." Grandmother. Abioji. Father. The cherry blossoms drifted around her like pink snow. The sun warmed her face. And for the first time in 27 years, the hollow ache in her chest was gone. Replaced by something she had never dared to believe she deserved. Home. I'm home. Nora spent 27 years believing she was thrown away like garbage. But the truth? She was stolen. Wanted. Loved, before she even took her first breath. Here's the lesson: just because no one told you that you matter, doesn't mean you don't. Maybe someone out there is praying for you right now, and you don't even know it. If this story made you cry, made you hope, made you believe that better days are coming. Drop your comment and country you are watching from. I read every single one comments. And if this story made you feel something, hit subscribe. For more stories like this are coming.